Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 56th episode of TechLifeSkills with Tanmay. Thank you very much for joining me today. I know we've had a couple of technical difficulties with actually getting the stream up. This is a new link, but once again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in today. Now, as you all know, I absolutely love to hear from the next generation of technologists on their thoughts on where technology is headed in the future, what their experiences have been, and really what they wish they knew when they were starting their journeys. And today, we have the opportunity to do just that and hear from two very special students working on some very interesting technology. Now, we're being joined by Maram and Mikateko. Maram is a data specialist completing her master's in web technologies, and Mikateko is a software engineering student working as a junior software engineer at Tradeway. She's also an IBM Z ambassador and Z student, so I cannot wait to hear her thoughts on technologies like mainframes, which is something that I'm also very passionate about. And so now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Maram and Mikateko to the show. Hi, Maram. Hi, Mikateko. How are you?
Good,
Hey,
thank
Tanmay.
you.
Well, it's glad to have you both on the show. It's really exciting. Can't wait to hear from the two of you. But before we do that, I know I did talk a little bit about the work that two of you do. Before we dig deeper, would you like to maybe quickly introduce yourselves? I mean, Maram, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, hello everybody. Hello Tanmay. Hello Mikateko. I am Maram Hamza. I am from Syria. I am data specialist and computer engineer. I have been working with different kinds of data for the past 4 years, and I am very excited to share with you my experience in data analysis and data science.
Thank you very much. Great to hear from you. Data science, machine learning, these are things that I'm, incredibly passionate about, things that I've been working with for some time. And so it'll be great to dig deeper into that. And Mikateko, what about you? Would you like to maybe quickly introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit more about the work that you do?
No problem. Well, hello everybody. Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Mikateko. I'm a fourth year software engineering student. I reside in South Africa. And as Tanmay mentioned, I'm a junior software engineer at Tradeway, and I've been there for like a couple of months now. My journey into software engineering is quite the interesting one. Not only did I just like focus on software engineering during university, but I took a leap of faith and decided to explore other technologies and languages as well outside of my university curriculum. And I'm quite excited to share those with you guys as well. But yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been an advocate for learning as you go, like learning from experience. And I
Yeah.
feel like being able to, actually get out there in the industry and learn about things without having that specific sort of structure that like school or work gives you, I think is really useful. So it's going to be great to hear your experiences on that as well. Now, just before we dig deeper into this, though, of course, I do want to start off by knowing a little bit more about why, right? Why technology for the two of you? I mean, I know personally that when I got into the world of technology, it was just out of sheer curiosity, right? Like back when I was 5, just the curiosity of, oh, how do computers work, right? That was something that I wanted to know because there were toys that I used to play with, right? And so I want to know with the two of you, what was that moment when you actually started to realize that, technology is something that you're passionate about and you sort of started going on this path of working with tech. So once again, Marm, how about we start with you? What sort of led to you thinking, I want to work with technology?
Actually, I have always been passionate about computers and technology since my childhood. Actually, I believe that technology can make our world a better place to live in. So that's why I chose to study computer engineering actually, and I chose to put this experience in the humanitarian field in Syria. So that's why I did my decision to be a computer engineer and a data specialist.
Right, the humanitarian field, and really just realizing that with technology we have this sort of power to solve problems, right? I think that's something that I mean, at first, when I was super young, that wasn't something that I necessarily realized. I was just like, technology's fun. It's what I like. But then slowly over time, you start to realize that, hey, when you build technology, you can solve real problems, right? And so that definitely is like a major sort of point of inspiration, I'm sure, for you. And what about you, Mikateko? Could you say maybe how you got into the world of tech?
Well, I think my story is a little different compared to Maram because I didn't necessarily have a passion for technology in my younger years.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason, and this is just a short and a really complex story, is that I wanted to understand what will keep you in the loop meant as a programming joke. I wanted to understand what that meant. So there was a subject that I was taking back when I was in high school. That was geography, and I left geography simply because I wanted to understand what that joke meant. So I left geography and I took information technology, and I guess that's where my love for technology grew. My curiosity, more than anything, kind of drove me into technology. And from there, I took software engineering as a degree, and I haven't stopped that curiosity or that searching nature ever since. And I just feel like this is a space in the world that will absolutely grow it, provide a better means of living for everybody. I just can't wait to see how it evolves. So that's how I got here.
That is really fascinating to hear, and it all started with a joke that you wanted to understand. Wow.
I found out what the joke meant, by the way.
What was it? I'm curious
now. So in programming, there are things called for loops, if loops, and I needed to understand what that meant because I asked them what they had papers and papers of coding. And I asked them, what do these papers mean? I don't know what's going on. And they said, don't worry, we'll keep you in the loop. And I didn't understand what that meant. So I took IT for the sake of understanding what that loop meant and what that joke meant. And now I get it. Now I get
it. That's incredible. Yeah, don't break that loop. Okay, yeah, that wasn't. but yeah, that's such an inspiring story. It all started with that one joke that you wanted to understand. To think that you moved out of that field of geography to getting into the world of computer science and programming to understand what I'm going to keep you in the loop meant. That is incredible. But we're going to dig deeper into that world of software engineering in a moment. Really quickly though, I do want to start off by asking you both a question. This is something we get a lot on the student specials. As a matter of fact, we're already getting quite a few questions from the audience, so I'll be sure to get to those in a minute. I do see your questions, Gabby and Snehal. We'll get to that in a second. Really quickly though, I do want to start off by just preemptively asking you the question that I'm sure we're going to get, which is, what is your favorite programming language and why? So Mikateko, what about you? What would you say?
Okay, I would definitely say C#. I think it's a little more easier to grasp, if anything. I mean, there is that competition of Python, don't get me wrong. But I think C# simply because I've learned it for the past 4 years now and I've kind of mastered it a little bit. I think my second would have to be Python, but I don't think I have a valid reason why. I just enjoy it.
All right. Well, so when it comes to C#, I'll say there are a few people that know that I have certain thoughts about C# and the way that they design the language that I don't necessarily enjoy all that much.
Interesting.
But it has its use cases, and I advocate for using the right tool for the job all the time, right? It's not like my favorite programming language is the best language there is. It's a good language, but it's always about using the right tool for the job and what you're familiar with. So it's interesting to hear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's because of its a structured language more than anything for me. I like structure, as opposed to your other opposing languages. I don't think I should make JavaScript. It's not structured for me personally. Personally, I don't see any structure in it. So I love structure, and I think that's why I'm leaning towards C# a lot. Yeah.
JavaScript is almost like if you tried to take an interpreted language like Python, but you had none of the advantages of an interpreted language like Python and just all of the disadvantages of a compiled language and all of the disadvantages of an interpreted language, right? I don't see exactly I don't exactly enjoy it. However, Maram, I do know that you are doing a master's in web technologies. And so you're probably a lot more familiar with JavaScript than I am, and so you probably enjoy it more than I do, just because I'm not as familiar with it, probably. So what are your thoughts?
I actually enjoy JavaScript, but my favorite programming language is Python because you can use it anywhere. It's very flexible and it's amazing for data scientists.
So I think we found middle
So
ground.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, Python's one of those things where it's just so flexible and you can use it for so many things that it sort of works in all these different industries, whether that's data science or a lot of other things where you need to run compute because just all these libraries are written in C, so they're inherently pretty fast. So we can agree on that. And this might actually come up a little bit later in the conversation as well. But I do see a couple questions that I actually want to start answering before we dig deeper into our conversation today. Starting off with a question from Gabby. So Gabby asks, how did the two of you, and this actually ties, into what you were saying in the beginning of Mikateko, how did the two of you like to engage with technology outside of work and school? So would you maybe like to expand a little bit upon that? Mikateko, we can start with you, and then Maram will get to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think because of that curiosity nature that I spoke about earlier on, I did understand that, the basis and the ground of what school would give you is, vitally important when it comes to applying for, your jobs or just like an internship or whatever the case may be. But you can't just have that. You do have to expand your knowledge outside of your university curriculum. So what I did with that was that I joined like a couple of ambassadorships, or I just decided to earn a couple of badges. So I took this initiative to join an ambassadorship called Z Ambassador. And that is students who are basically advocates for IBMZ. And that was quite an amazing experience. Not only did I get to speak to people quite literally all over the world, I got to learn other languages that my university didn't actually teach me. Like I got to learn Python, COBOL, Rex, and I might not be able to apply these languages, but essentially every programming languages have some sort of similarity. So it's good to expand your knowledge regardless. I built a tiny game in COBOL, not to say that it took me far, but it's something. And also depending on, you're gonna constantly change your interests in the software engineering field. I've noticed. At some point in life, you might want to be a front-end developer and focus entirely on React or Angular. At some point in life, you might want to be a backend and just focus entirely on Python or C#. Just expand your knowledge wherever you can, and the possibilities are quite literally endless. So if there's anything that I can say, just don't focus on school entirely. There's so many other things that you can focus on outside of school.
Absolutely. Maram, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but really quickly, I do want to say one thing, and that is that tying into what you said about how every programming language has something in similar and they're all sort of building upon this one common foundation. One of the things that I like to point to, and I talk about how learning from experience just is so much more valuable than specifically a course. Like this one time, this was easily 2 years ago, I wanted to calculate very large factorials, and I wanted to do this in Swift. I don't exactly remember why I was doing this, but I was doing it. And so I built a little program that had like a custom big number library that would store numbers in this really optimized, byte array, and it had like a custom multiplication and, addition algorithm and everything, and it worked pretty well. But then I thought, what if some other language did this faster? And I was like, I've been meaning to learn Kotlin, so why not rewrite this in Kotlin? So I, put together an implementation, and I'm sure that if I knew Kotlin more in depth, I could have put together a faster implementation. But still, Kotlin somehow managed to beat out my Swift implementation, despite this being my first time coding in Kotlin, and me having coded in Swift a lot. And from that experience, I realized that one of the reasons that my Swift code wasn't as fast was because I wasn't passing it the right optimization flags, as well as the fact that I wasn't designing the data structure to work well with Arc memory management, right? And these are things that you can't just spontaneously learn from some sort of course, right? These are very random, arbitrary things to be covered in some specific course, right? To think I've written a book on Swift, And still, I didn't know those very specific, peculiar details on how Arc memory management works and how strings are stored in stacks versus the heap, depending on the size of the strings and things like this, right? So these are things that you really learn as you're building that I think are super valuable to be able to leverage. But Maram, what about you? What do you think? How have you been engaging with technology outside of work and outside of school?
Yeah. You can't rely just on university. You have to do your research, to attend courses, to try to think about an idea and to try to implement it in an application in any programming language that you are interested to use. So university is not going to give you the experience. Mm-hmm. You have to work hard to practice to be a good developer or computer engineer.
It's all about that practice, absolutely. And actually, speaking of practice, there's actually a question that we have here from Ravi, and speaking of the world of data science as well. He's asking, what is the future of the data science field? Now, I know that this is sort of jumping ahead quite a bit, but really quickly, if you have any thoughts right now to share on what you think the future of the data science field looks like, I'd love to hear that. And then as we cover it a bit more throughout the show, we can dig deeper into it.
Yeah. I am coming to this. I'm coming to talk about this in details. But I think that the future is for data scientists because it integrates all parts of programming, databases, AI. So, yeah, in short, this is my answer for now. I will elaborate in the next questions.
Absolutely. And actually let's start digging a little bit deeper into that. Let's start off talking a little bit about the world of data science. Let's start off with something pretty, basic, I guess. What exactly is data science? Because I feel like, it's one of those things where there's a lot of different ways that people think about it. There's the one industry standard definition, but then there's a lot of derivatives of those definitions. So what in your mind exactly is data science?
Yeah. This is the most important question to start our episode with, actually, because we almost have wondered what is data science, because it's a trendy word nowadays. So simply, data science is the art of working with data and mixing between business, technologies, and statistics. Since almost all organizations nowadays are generating huge amount of data, and it becomes difficult to store, monitor, and analyze this data. So here the data science role comes. A data science focuses on data warehousing and data modeling to track the ever-growing data sets. So the information extracted from data science applications are used to guide business processes and reach organizational goals.
Mm-hmm. So data science is all about being able to take, all this data, obviously, that we're collecting and so far we've just sort of been storing and keeping in an archive somewhere and actually starting to extract insights from it, right?
So, yeah, exactly. Data science produced insights.
Very nice. Data science produces insights, right? It enables us to take this sort of raw stuff that we've just been storing and actually start to understand it and extract those, actionable insights now. Here's a question in terms of the impact that data science technology can have. I know that you're very passionate about using technology, for example, as you mentioned, in like the humanitarian field and enabling people to live better lives. How do you think a technology like data science can have that capability, right? To be able to save lives, to augment them. How do you think that ties in?
Okay. Using data science techniques to understand and analyze the large data sets available today has a huge impact on human lives. It can provide the targeted information for healthcare professionals to give the best treatment to patients, for example, or help predict natural disasters so people can prepare early. Like in Syria, organizations are using data to decide where to help and what kind of humanitarian assistance to provide. For example, one of the organizations wanted to provide a new service to a local community. but they didn't know, they haven't decided what kind of services is most needed in this area. So they collected the data and analyzed it to have a better vision of the situation in the area. So after that, they can provide the most needed assistance in this area.
Right. So again, because data science enables us to extract these kinds of insights from large amounts of data, right, we can use it in specific use cases that then enable us to be able to save lives. Like as you mentioned, predicting natural disasters, right, being able to determine where to send, aid and relief and these sorts of things. These are things that we couldn't do without the power of data science, right? It's impossible to manually sift through all this data, right? It's simply too much for us to deal with.
Yeah.
Taking a quick pause from the data science field, Mikateko, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh no, absolutely. In the university that I was at, we had to choose either between two majors that we could either do. So it was either software engineering or becoming a data scientist. And I chose the field of software engineering for all the other reasons that I explained, back then. But I took such an interest in data science and how these certain languages will be able to just how that incorporates it, how the languages are incorporated into data science. That's why I decided to take initiative like learning Rex and COBOL and new Python. And in as I became a Z ambassador, I also got to learn a little bit of artificial intelligence as well. And I do have a very limited knowledge on data science. So whenever I get the opportunity to learn from it, I'm always attentive and listening. It's like, wow, this is actually really, really cool. So not really anything to add, but just to explain how excited I am to listen to her speak upon it as well.
Yeah, very nice. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're excited. When it's nice. I'm sure everybody in the audience is excited as well. And as a matter of fact, speaking of learning about data science, there's some questions about that, and of course, I will also ask you about resources as to where folks can learn more about data science in a moment as well. First of all, though, I think there is one question that I want to take up from Shravani on the YouTube live stream first, asking, thank you for the comment about changing interests in computer science. I really needed this. But the industry doesn't really want people who may not have solid experience in the domain. Any tips on this? So, and any thoughts on that? Mikateko, maybe we could start with you.
Cool. Sorry, I think I was cutting a little bit there. Is it all right if you could please just repeat it?
Sure. So basically asking that, thank you for the comment about changing interests in computer science. I really needed this. But the industry doesn't really want people who may not have solid experience in the domain. So any tips?
Okay. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. There are certain companies that actually want somebody not necessarily with a lot of experience per se, especially if you're coming straight out of university, but more so a curiosity and a discipline. Coding and becoming a software engineer is not just something that you just learn from yesterday. It's a continuous build. And yeah, okay, some people do have, some experience and they might be chosen first. But if you have the experience and you don't have the discipline and the want to actually learn more, then you're not necessarily an asset. Most junior software engineers get their internships simply because they want to learn more. So I think if there's any tips that I can give you, especially when you get to like an interview kind of situation, don't lie. One, don't lie and say that you do have some sort of experience. And then when you actually get to the job that you don't necessarily have it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is be true and honest to the fact that you might not have enough experience, but you are so curious enough to learn more. And I think that is an important ground. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I feel like it actually goes back to another episode that I held with, with a couple different folks. Like, for example, I spoke to one of my mentors, Adam Holland, who used to work at a Fortune 1 company, actually, and he works in the cybersecurity domain. And he was talking about how when he's deciding, who do we hire, his sort of primary focus is always the person's mentality, right? And their sort of approach to solving problems, including on things that they don't know about already, right? And because within, I mean, as you mentioned, software development, software engineering, computer science, it's a continuous cycle of just always learning new things. There's always going to be the new toolkit. There's going to be the new, web framework. There's going to be the new, containerization toolkit, whatever, right? And it's not like you're just going to graduate university knowing exactly how Docker works and how to deploy Kubernetes clusters, and that's what you're going to do for the next 30 years, because 5 years from now, we might not have Kubernetes anymore, right? So it's always that continuous cycle of learning. And so I completely agree with that. And, it's all about getting that experience and having the right sort of mentality for it. Now, there is another question here, and this is one that I think would be more suited for you, Maram, asking, which is better for a career, AI or data science? So this is, again, a bit open-ended, but what do you think?
To AI and data science can work together, actually. Since AI can gives you the predictions, and data science gives you the insights. So, but from my personal experience, it's better to start with data science and then move on to AI.
Mm-hmm. Why would you say that?
To start with the insights at first, and then to look at the future.
Right, that makes sense. Being able to take a look at the insights on the data that we have today and then use technologies like machine learning and AI to predict the future. As a matter of fact, you've talked about data science. Could you maybe also help us understand, actually you kind of have already helped us understand sort of the difference between data science and AI, as in, data science for insights, AI for prediction. But so if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about sort of what the difference is between data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, because I think these are all the different buzzwords today that everybody sort of throws around willy-nilly, but nobody necessarily, not nobody, but very few people actually totally understand the distinctions between them. We recently held an episode where one of our guests gave, I think, a pretty unique way of separating AI from the rest of it. But what are your thoughts? How would you sort of compartmentalize data science, machine learning, and AI for someone who doesn't work in these fields?
Okay. As I said before, data science produces insights, and machine learning produces predictions. Artificial intelligence produces actions. When all these three components work together, that will help the organization to become more flexible and gives more efficient solutions. As I said before, when you want to be a data scientist, you have to start with data science before moving to the future.
Mm-hmm. So it's all about. Go ahead.
That will help the organization to improve its decision, and will help the decision makers to provide more efficient solutions.
Mm-hmm. So being able to take a look at the data that we have today, extract insights from it, that enables, organizations to, as you mentioned, have more efficient sort of decision-making processes today. And then using machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to, for example, project that data into the future and make predictions is where that sort of forecasting and sort of new capabilities come in. As a matter of fact, actually, sort of talking a little bit more about the distinction between AI and machine learning, recently we had another guest, Alyssa Simpson Rockwerger, on the show, and she was talking about how really the distinction, in her opinion, between AI and machine learning specifically is that artificial intelligence isn't a technology term. Artificial intelligence is a user experience term. Right? We call something artificially intelligent when it feels intelligent, right? That's not necessarily a technical distinction between an algorithm, because there's all kinds of AI, right? You could have Stockfish, or I believe it was called Stockfish, the chess playing bot, and there's also, for example, AlphaZero. They're built in entirely different ways. AlphaZero is a deep neural network. Stockfish is human written rules, but we still both call them AI. Yet when your Apple Watch predicts that you took a fall and calls emergency services, we don't call that AI. We call that machine learning, because it doesn't feel intelligent. It feels like, yeah, a watch should be able to do that. It's just a bunch of sensors, right? And so it's more of a user experience term than anything. But while we're on the topic of AI, machine learning, there's another question from Shravani asking, I have been a ServiceNow developer, which is a cloud computing ticketing tool, for 3 years, and I'm learning machine learning and data science. I'm trying to find jobs in machine learning and data science, but the calls that I get from HR say no because I have no experience. So any advice for Shravani on how she can get some experience with machine learning and data science and find a job in that field?
Okay, I would like to say that data science is not something that you steps that you move on them. It's I think, yeah, it's a mindset. So when you want to be a data scientist, there is no best practice. Just you have to have an analytical thinking, and to be good at math, and have a good technical skills, and good technical background, and then you can start with the courses for beginners in databases, Python, and big data, data mining, data modeling, and then you can have an experience by time. So you can start with the baby steps, as they say, and then you will be experienced after 1 or 2, 3.
That makes sense, right? Being able to start off with those sort of baby steps and starting off with the individual concepts that build up data science as a field, and being able to master those individual blocks before sort of combining them and saying, now I can work on data science technology because I know these individual pieces that are really important with data science. Because again, as you mentioned, data science isn't a technology as much as it is a mindset of using these different technologies in a specific way. As a matter of fact, actually, another question. Well, actually, first I'll ask this one from Deepak on the live stream, asking: is there any role? This is sort of tying in both of your expertise. Is there any role of JavaScript in AI? What do you think? Where do your web technologies masters and your sort of data science sort of specialty sort of intersect?
That's an interesting question. I also want to know on that.
All right, what do you think? Maram.
Interesting question. I haven't thought about JavaScript and data science with each other in one combination.
I mean, I feel like there would be a couple of interesting use cases. Like, for example, maybe you could elaborate upon, like, for example, I think maybe in edge computing, right? Being able to make decisions on the edge, like on client sides and stuff like that. Do you think that might be one way where like AI and JavaScript intersect?
Yeah, it can be. Impossible is nothing in technology. Everything is able to implement. Just try.
Absolutely. Have you seen any use cases of working on this kind of technology before?
Actually, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen.
Okay, so you're more on sort of like the back end of the world of like data science and working with that kind of technology.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Also, one more question actually that I do want to quickly ask. This is from a good friend of mine, Justin. This came in much before the show. This was like back on Friday when I was talking to him about this. I told him that you would be on the show, and one of the first questions he asked was, because he's a web developer, he asked, oh, she's doing a master's in web technologies. What do you learn in a master's in web technologies? So maybe would you like to expand a little bit more upon that? Like, what exactly are you doing for that master's?
Yeah, actually, master in web technologies is just like the bachelor in computer engineering, but in more advanced way. Mm-hmm. So we learn more about programming languages, and we implement more projects, and we learn about data mining and the academic courses, the academic side of the technology.
Right, the academic side of technology. That makes a lot of sense. As a matter of fact, actually, speaking about that sort of academic side of technology, one thing that I want to talk about is, there's so many different, software engineering and sort of IT students in general out there, right? And I feel like it's hard for a lot of these students to, stand out necessarily, and, a lot of them just sort of fit to the mean, right? Fit to the average sort of like IT student. And one of the things that I'm wondering is how exactly can, for example, a student studying IT, whether that is software engineering or, computer science, whatever that might be, how can they stand out from the rest of, the students, or how can they specialize in things that make them unique? And, maybe Mikateko, if you'd like to start off with some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Coming as a fresh out of university student myself, actually, there was a lot of competition. I mean, I think my university was focused entirely on IT and all the aspects of it. We didn't actually have any other subjects. It was solely IT, and that could branch off into then software engineering with data scientists. And obviously, when we had to do, because now I'm doing my internship, yeah. And so when, jobs would like select students, they wouldn't just select students that would, adhere to the university course, but rather try and expand themselves and their knowledge in what they feel they would fit best in. So if anything, I do have a couple of like websites and some PDFs that I could also put on the Google Docs that Tanmay and I will like put together sometime after the show, that you could take a look at and take initiative to actually expand your knowledge on that. Like invest yourself in projects, invest yourself in ambassadorships, invest yourself in badges, earning those badges. Yeah, sure, they might not necessarily adhere to, for example, your job specification, but people in companies, I've come to notice, love people that would just overextend themselves. You want to learn more. Technology is an ever evolving field. So for you to be on top of your game every single time is what takes you and steps you away from like the norm of IT students. That's my input, yeah.
Absolutely, right? The earlier in technology that you understand that things are moving so quickly that what you learn today might be completely irrelevant like 2 years from now, or even much sooner, right? The sooner you understand that, the more you'll be able to stand out. And that's because you're just inherently going to be learning about these new technologies, building things, working on random projects, whether that is something, I feel like it goes back to one of the episode that we actually had with Bridget, who is a recruiter at IBM, Bridget King. She was talking about how no matter what you do, right, it could be something completely random just on your GitHub. Count that as something you've worked on, an actual side project on your resume, right? Because it could be like, for example, remember that big number thing I was talking about in Swift. When I built that, I was like, I'm just going to throw this out 30 minutes later. I don't really need this for anything. But if this is something that I'd uploaded to GitHub, I should have actually gone ahead and put that up there and said, this is something I've worked on my resume, and said, I can point to this and say I've built a big number library and I've implemented X multiplication algorithm, whatever that was. I forgot what the name was. So I think it's Kratzebaugh multiplication, but whatever that was. So being able to point to these things that you've done. And so definitely I'll go ahead and work with you on those links, and we'll put that in the description. And speaking of links in the description, there is another comment from JP on YouTube asking, you guys are doing great in your domains. Where can I follow you all? And so I will say to that, I will have Maram and Mikateko put their contact in the description of the video after this is done. So feel free to follow them or get in touch. We will put their contact in the description after this. Wonderful. Okay. There is another question. This one's again from Deepak, and this one again I do want to ask you, Mikateko. I think this is interesting. Deepak's asking, how can we increase our logical knowledge in any programming language? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that you would need to, because there's so many different languages, so it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of language that there are. And the first thing that I think helped me with regards to how I tackle every single every single language, was that I had to shift my mindset from that everything is different to they have the same logic. At the end of the day, we're all going to be going towards the same goal. This language will be building this, right? It's just the syntax. It's literally just the syntax thing. Obviously, there are a little bit of pedantics with certain languages, like C# is an oriented. Great. oriented object programming language, whereas some other languages don't actually, have that. So if anything, I think just tackle on the fact that the differences between languages that may have similarities is just syntax, simply. JavaScript and your C#, for example, not entirely the same, but it's just a small little syntax. Once you get that done, once you get that mindset, then you should be able to tackle quite a lot of other languages as well. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's where, multi-paradigm languages are also really nice, because then with a language like C#, right, you have object-oriented and then you have objects. But then with a language like Swift, where it's like multi-paradigm, protocol-oriented, object-oriented, structure-oriented, whatever. Functional. It can be functional if you like it too. You have a lot more flexibility to learn all these different paradigms of compute. And again, as you mentioned, at the end of the day, switching between these languages is just syntax. But they also sort of provide you all with their own unique tools, which are really interesting, right? So like within C#, maybe you have specific toolkits that are really convenient to work with for graphics. Maybe within Swift, you have certain toolkits that are really easy to work with OS natives, and so on and so forth in other languages. And so being able to I'm going to make another programming reference here, at runtime, being able to just take a look at all these different languages and the sort of tools that they provide, and being able to extrapolate and say, given this problem and given these tools from this language, this is how I can put them together to make a solution to a problem. I feel like that's really, really valuable as a skill. And speaking of that skill, in terms of how to learn that skill, what would you recommend would be some good resources? Because I know that we always get the question of, and I'm pretty sure we got it now, but I'm not seeing that in the live stream chat at the moment. Competitive programming is something that a lot of people are interested in. And I want to know what your thoughts are on the world of competitive programming. How valuable do you think it is, right? Like, for example, I know a couple of folks that just spend a lot of time solving LeetCode problems. Just going through one by one, solving all the LeetCode problems they can, and so they can do better in like job interviews, for example. What do you think the value of that kind of practice is? Mikateko.
I'm not entirely sure if you were referring to that question to me or to Maram.
I mean, both of you, but maybe we can start off with Mikateko, with you.
Awesome. Great. The value. Wow, geez. Okay, so before this company that I was in, I had to do a little interview with another company, and they asked me to go through a HackerRank question, a HackerRank based question, and okay, competitive programming. To a certain extent, I think it is really good. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to be working for companies that will have a certain deadline, certain time limits. And, the quicker that you do solve these questions, the easier that we can roll out some of your code snippets and all of that jazz. So to a certain extent, I really do agree with it. I think for some students, though, especially when they're about to apply for like interviews, whatever the case may be, for some students, they may be pressured by the amount of time that companies would give based on like a HackerRank question or whatever the case may be. In the real life world, I have Google on the side. If I really do forget like a little code snippet, Stack Overflow is my friend, kind of thing. So I think to a certain extent, it does help. Don't get me wrong. Practice makes perfect, 100%. For interviews per se, I wouldn't necessarily do that. Perhaps maybe not a time limit, but just a more easier way for students to feel a little bit calmer, a little bit more sure of themselves, because companies do become daunting and all of that jazz. So just something else for that. But I guess in general, competitive programming, I see a benefit to it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely value, right? In that it provides you that with that practice that we were talking about on, and any sort of experience you can get with programming and solving problems and building that logical thinking is helpful. But you're right, sort of overdoing it doesn't necessarily, it has diminishing returns very quickly. I guess a key reason for that is that once, as you said, it's not representative at all of what we do in the real world. Very little of what you do in the real world is thinking of, given this very specific time constraint and this very specific problem with this very specific input and output format, I need to find some way to solve this specific problem, right? That's very few times ever, if ever, will you be encountered with that kind of problem.
100%.
And in the real world, it's I feel like a lot of programmers, especially students, would be surprised in the real world and like actual large enterprises. The code that people write is the kind of code where like in school you wouldn't get marks for that kind of code, right? In school. I feel like
Yes.
people are surprised when they see that. Like I have seen some of the worst code that I've ever seen in actual large enterprise grade projects. And
Yeah.
it's because, in the enterprise, in the real world, it's not just about code. It's about so many other things than just the code that you're writing. Very few
100%.
of these sets of code are hotspots that need to be optimized, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about using it the right way, right? Again, these sorts of tools are exactly that. They are tools to help you learn.
Exactly.
If you're using them the right way, they can be super helpful. Right, there's another question here from, let's see here. This is from Pukesh asking, once again, is there any difference between AI and machine learning technologies? We did cover that just a little while ago, so if you'd like to sort of rewind a little bit, and you can take a look at that. But also, if you'd like to watch the episode with Alyssa Rockworker, we do cover that in more detail. I will link to that in the description. We talk about how AI is a user experience term, not a technology term, and I really like that way of thinking about technology. All right. Now, sort of expanding from here, there is another thing that I want to talk about. I think hopefully Maram's connection is still up, but I don't think we can see her right now. So hopefully she comes back soon. Until then, there's another question that I want to ask you, Mikateko, and that is, when people ask me, how do you get into the world of code? What I like to say is don't treat code as like this different exotic thing, right? Like I feel like too many people think of there's all these other subjects and then there's code and computer science, right? That I don't think that's the right way of thinking about it. And a lot of people are like, oh, but you got to be like a mathematical genius and all these things. You have to think statistically. What are your thoughts on that, right? Do you need to be like good at math to do software engineering, for example?
No, absolutely not. I think there is a benefit, don't get me wrong.
Give me
With the
one
university.
moment. I do need to switch
No problem.
over to here. All right, now people can see us. All right, continue, please.
Cool. All right. No, yeah, no problem. With the university that I was at, the only requirements that was actually needed was some maths, but only 50%, and English. You didn't need any prior IT knowledge, no coding knowledge, not even CAT, nothing. Like I mentioned before, all that was absolutely needed was the drive, the understanding, and the curiosity to be able to do it. I remember I took IT while I was in high school, and then I obviously took that knowledge as I went to university. There was a student that was in my university that had no IT knowledge whatsoever, no CAT knowledge whatsoever. She got first in the year while I was in first year. She got first in the year while I got third. So it's not to say that having that background knowledge isn't useful. It 100% is, 100%. But if you don't have it, it's not a total train smash at all. Like I said, also for interviews and whatever the case may be, your experience and whatever you have knowledge-wise, yes, it is helpful, but you need to be able to want to learn more, want to engage in it more. So somebody who's currently studying mechanical engineering, for example, yes, okay, totally different aspects, but still the same intensity, I feel. So if you're really curious and you want to learn more about mechanical engineering, what's software engineering? It just transition. Obviously, it's going to take some time. Take it upon yourself to go onto the sites like HackerRank and learn more about the coding. But if you have the drive for it, and if you really, really, really want to, I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's you don't need all this, really genius level thinking that a lot of people think you do, which is, a common theme that I've seen among lots of people, right? Which is also why I think it's important to get people more interested in code at a younger age, because then you don't have as many of
100%.
those, preconceived notions of like, oh, you got to be able to do X or Y to code, right? Kids are interested in pretty much everything because everything's so new to them, right? And so
Yeah.
code is just one of those other things that they're like, oh yeah, that's fun to do. And as a matter of fact, actually speaking of the sort of analytical thinking, we have a question from Rajan on the live stream asking, computer science has multiple disciplines. Could you please tell me which ones have a requirement of like analytical thinking? And I think we just covered that. So what do you think of the different disciplines? What kind of mindset do the different disciplines require?
we kind of already covered that. I think if anything, don't be afraid to ask. I think that's the one thing. You are a powerhouse, but you can't. Not one software project has just been built by one person alone. It's okay to ask. It's okay to research. It's okay to just admit to the fact that you probably don't have as much knowledge as you might want in this specific field, and that it's probably better to ask somebody who has a little bit more knowledge. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to try as well. Don't be afraid to fail and try multiple times. All your small little projects, like Tanmay mentioned with his big number coding project, don't be afraid to push those out as well. It might not be as big as you think, but it makes companies and other people know that you have initiatives, that you want to learn more about it, regardless of how small the project be. So don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to ask. Build as many projects as possible. What's another discipline? Time. Yeah, use your time effectively, especially when it comes to the field of software engineering and technology. Use that time effectively. Whenever you do find the time, don't get distracted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. It's about being able to show that initiative, right? It's about all these companies. They do care about, of course, your experience, but also that mindset. That is absolutely key for a lot of people, right? And I feel like that really proves that. So actually, another question from JP says, "Thank you for taking out my previous query. Any thoughts on robotic process automation?" We will cover this in a moment. Maram is trying to rejoin the meeting. I'm going to quickly, pause the stream for just a moment, and we're going to be right back in 30 seconds to a minute, trying to get Maram back on the stream. For some reason, our platform isn't being particularly cooperative, so I'm going to be right back. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute. We're back. All right, so we've restarted the meeting. Maram should be able to join us momentarily. Again, connection issues. You know how, again, every time this happens, it's kind of ironic that we're experiencing technical difficulties on a stream about technology. But this is why we need the next generation of technologists. You got to help us fix these issues. So sort of continuing, I want to cover JP's question really quickly, talking about robotic process automation. Is RPA something that you've worked with before or worked on? I have some experience with it, but do you have any experience?
about experience. While I joined the Z Ambassador program, I got to touch on it, but not necessarily. So I don't think I kind of have enough, experience to provide some value, unfortunately.
No worries. In general, I guess if I'm going to cover it quickly, I feel like robotic process automation, RPA, is a buzzword a lot more than it is anything incredibly valuable, right? It can in some cases be, the right tool for the job, but I feel like RPA is really more of an umbrella term for, in general, taking processes that should have been automated a long time ago and automating them using some kind of rudimentary technology, right? RPA isn't necessarily all that advanced, but in some cases, RPA, the only reason it can be sort of difficult to implement is because of the fact that it's sort of being trying to be implemented within these sort of older legacy applications. So hopefully that answered your question, JP. Unfortunately, I don't have all that much experience with RPA, and neither does Mikateko. But again, hopefully, if you have any sort of follow-up questions about more specific stuff, feel free to ask us. All right, so we're going to let Maram in now. All right, there we go. We're back with Maram and Mikateko. You can see and hear us all now. All right, so continuing as we were talking, there's another question. Actually, this one's for you, Maram. So you joined just in time. This is from Hamad. He's asking, what is the difference between a data scientist and a data analyst?
Yeah, that's a tricky question actually. A data analyst doesn't require an experience in programming and a technical background. You can just have a technical mind, sorry, not technical mind, analytical mind, and you can use Excel to analyze data. So you have just to be passionate about data and understand the data sets, and then you can use any tool that you are flexible with to analyze this data. While data science is a whole thing. Yeah, you can use in data science Excel, or you can use Python, or you can use databases, or you can use advanced methods to analyze the data and to treat the data and to clean the data. So that's my answer so far.
Wonderful. So that makes a lot of sense because this actually ties into another question that we got from the stream. This one's from Abe, asking, what do you think a non-programmer but domain expert, specifically in healthcare, can do sort of to get into data science? What will be his or her career path? And I feel like from what you've mentioned, it makes sense that Abe should get into data, being a data analyst, since without that sort of technical background, it makes more sense to be working with the data directly instead of building the technology. Hello, you kind of cut out there.
Actually,
All right, continue. We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Tanmay. I'm sorry. Okay, so your question was about what healthcare professional would do with data science, right?
Yeah. So what's like a career path to get into data science if you're not a programmer, but you are a specialist in a domain like healthcare?
Yeah. If you are interested in data and you are interested to become a data scientist, you can start with the courses for beginners about databases and mathematics. You have to be good at math to succeed as a data scientist. So if you are not good at math, you should work hard on this part, and then you can start with to learn about databases. And then you can start to learn about statistics and applied mathematics. And as I said before, you can use Excel for the beginners, and then you can use advanced methods. and tools.
Right. So being able to learn the basics, right? Whether in data science that happens to be
And,
mathematics, right?
and then,
I remember we had an episode with another student, Malike, who also talked, very similarly to the fact that with data science, it's important to have that mathematical foundation backing, right? Too many people try and jump into the world of AI or data science without necessarily having a lot of that mathematical backing. And in some cases, that can be fine, right? Like if you're just trying to take a machine learning model and implement it into your code, that's fine. You don't necessarily need to understand how the backpropagation works and how, all wide neural networks work and how these function estimators are trained and things like that. But when you're starting to actually build your own architectures, that can be super helpful, especially within a domain like healthcare. So hopefully that helps you, Abhay and Rajan. Let me know if you have any further questions on that, and of course we'll go ahead and take those up. All right, so next up there is another, actually there's a follow-up from Abe saying, I'm already into healthcare data analyst. I'm trying to learn machine learning techniques. So actually on that point, Maram, do you have any suggestions as to specific resources that people can use to get into the world of like machine learning or AI, some sort of courses or books or what would you recommend?
yeah. I did actually my research last year to improve my skills in data science, and I found courses on Coursera platform offered by IBM. They are amazing. I finished the 14 courses during 20 days during the last quarantine. So I would recommend them, highly recommend it. And
Very
I
nice.
use Linda. Linda
Wonderful.
platform is
Linda and
a good.
Coursera. We will be sure to link to those in the description, everybody, so feel free to take a look at those. I see there are a couple more questions coming in from the live stream chat. I see Shiva said she wasn't able to attend the last couple of episodes because of a couple things she had to get done, and she was tested negative for COVID-19. That's very nice. Thankfully, hopefully, again, more and more people can sort of recover from this, and we can finally get back to doing things like TechLifeSkills in person. That would be incredible. But welcome back to TechLifeSkills. And so, yeah, again, any more questions, feel free to put them in the live stream chat. We'll definitely get to them. As a matter of fact, I do see one from Shiva that I do want to ask you, speaking of, Coursera and Linda, while we're on that topic. Shiva's asking, do free certificates, are they even sort of valued by like employers, or are they just for learning and not necessarily about the implementation of technology? So I feel like this is a question for both of you. Mikateko, how about we start off with you? Free certificates and like these online badges and stuff, do they have actual value when you're going to, like, for example, employers, or are they just for you to learn?
Both, actually. Obviously, you need to take it upon yourself, to learn outside of school, like I mentioned before. There's no harm in expanding your knowledge. There's no harm in like taking a bit of time to try and learn just the nitty-gritties on the specific language. It's probably been on your head for like a couple of weeks or so. But at the same time, companies also like that initiative too. It's not just knowledge that will just be thrown away, but initiative. And perhaps maybe one time in the software development company or whatever company you decide to work on, that perhaps they decide to, jump in on a project that is about maybe React or Angular, that's probably based on that. And you probably already built some sort of knowledge via that free badge that you learned, or that free certificate that took about 2 hours. It might not be a lot of knowledge, but it's something. It's some information that you can probably contribute to it as well. And if they can see that you have some sort of knowledge, that foundation, they can build with it from there. So no, I don't think it's not valuable. I think it's actually very valuable.
Absolutely, right? It's actually valuable from two perspectives because, going back to exactly the thing we were talking about before, it shows not only that you have this extra knowledge now, but also that you took the initiative enough to go and gain that knowledge, right? To go and take that course, learn that thing, whatever it might be, which, maybe another developer might not have, right? So that's one of the things that might be able to sort of be unique as well. So we'll go ahead and link to a couple of those resources back or in the description as well. Let's see. So there's another question here from Deepak asking, I have 4.6 years, pretty specific number, 4.6 years of experience in development. How can we start learning AI? I see, once again, we're having a few connection issues. Hopefully Alarm can join us. But until then, Unfortunately, I don't think Maram's able to hear us right now. Until then, I'll go ahead and sort of give you my thoughts really quickly. When it comes to learning artificial intelligence, we've already talked about a couple of super useful resources. We've talked about, for example, Coursera, Lynda, as well as other resources like cognitiveClass.ai are super useful. Again, we will link to them in the description below. There's also some books that you could take a look at. So, like for example, there's my book, Tanmay Teaches Julia, that you might want to take a look at. We talk about machine learning towards the end of the book, and I show you some examples of using Julia for machine learning. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite examples is using Julia to generate deep dream photos. So, for example, taking a photo of me and turning it into weird art, like this. Generating machine learning based art, which is incredibly fun. So do take a look at those. And once again, having that sort of programming and sort of general technical expertise, I think really does help when you're starting off with something like AI, because now you instantly have that base that you can work off of and use to build better technology. So that's, I think, definitely very helpful. All right. There's another question from Abe. Again, it would have been great if Maram were able to answer this one. Oh, maybe she's back, because Abe is asking, it would be really great if I can get a link to explore data science projects with solutions apart from a resource like Kaggle. Now, of course, you already mentioned exactly what I feel like a lot of people would have mentioned, which is use Kaggle. I feel like there are lots of other interesting resources to use. You could use like online data set repositories. I think there's also like the UCI, data repository that you can get data from in order to use for different machine learning tasks. Google has their own data set explorer now, where you can search up for different data sets online that you might find interesting. Even just finding, repositories with the right tags on GitHub can sometimes be really valuable. Maram, if you're back now, do you have any thoughts on links where people can explore data science projects with solutions, preferably, apart from Kaggle?
Links for data science courses or sources?
Projects.
Projects. Actually, the courses on Coursera offered from IBM, the last course in the data science specialization is the capstone. So you are going to implement a whole project for data science if you are going to attend the 8 previous courses. So that would be a very helpful step for anyone who wants to have an experience in data science.
Right, definitely. We'll go ahead and... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because you are going to move on all these steps that you have learned previously. Database, data analysis, data visualization.
Mm-hmm. Being able to build off of all of those all of those basic concepts and sort of extrapolate how to put them together into new ways. So again, we'll go ahead and link to these resources down in the description below after the episode. Okay, this is, again, I feel like this is a bit too open-ended to answer, but I still want to ask it just in case it's something that we can sort of provide some insight into. Pulkesh is asking, what are the requirements for freshers learning AI, and how much time can they expect to become an expert? So again, very open-ended, because it's hard to say, in exactly these many months you're going to become an expert of AI, right? I don't think you can ever say, now I am an expert, before I wasn't, and yesterday I was not. But still, what do you think, how long does it take to become, proficient with AI technology? And what are the requirements for people just getting into it?
Actually, the more you practice, the faster you get experienced in any field. So there is no limited time or limited amount of years. In 2 years, you are going to be experienced. No, in 2 months, you can be experienced if you are working really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's from my experience, actually.
I once saw a TED, I believe it was a TED talk, on how, when you're learning something, the relative amount of knowledge you gain from when you start and you know nothing about it to when you're an expert sort of starts off exponentially, and then eventually, as you become more and more sort of experienced at something, the relative knowledge gain sort of starts to plateau a little bit. And the reason for that is because you already know sort of so much that it takes a lot more work to learn more things. But at the same time, if you think about it, even though that sort of plateaus, the fact that you already know so much enables you to learn more things more quickly. Right? Even though it might not relatively be a lot compared to everything that you already know, it's still a lot more that you're learning a lot more quickly. Right? And so as you become an expert, more and more things can be learned a lot more quickly. Also, another question from Shiva. This one's for me, asking, when do you plan to upload the music produced by you and James on your channel? This is, in case you're unaware, music with lyrics written by machine learning systems that I've developed, a machine learning pipeline called Auto Lyricist. So that will be within the month. So I will be getting to this very soon. Again, it unfortunately is a bit more complex than just uploading music. There's logistics and stuff to handle around it. So we're working on it. So we've mostly cleared these things up. Very soon, you will be able to enjoy that music and hopefully much more of it very soon with more advanced machine learning pipelines as well. So do stay tuned for that. All right. Now, there is one more thing that I want to quickly ask, and this one, is for both of you, but I want to start off with Maram because I feel like this really applies to you. And, actually, it specifically applies to today's session. We've unfortunately been having some technical issues, and unfortunately these are things that aren't in your hands, Maram, and so that's just inherent to the way that technology works. We're going to have technical issues whenever we try and do something, right? And I feel like especially the common saying of when you want to demonstrate technology, it's always shy. That's the one thing. But like with Apple's keynote, even Apple, right, during their keynote introducing the iPhone 10, Face ID didn't work the first time just because all the AV staff was trying it before, and so Face ID locked up and asked for a passcode, so they had to switch to a backup phone on stage, which was really funny. But actually now that we're here, I do want to ask you, the region that you live in, right, the country that you live in, Syria, it doesn't necessarily have the strongest infrastructure for technology. And so how can you as a technologist actually develop your skills in that sort of area? And how can you work around that lack of infrastructure if you want to learn about like data science or computer engineering or whatever else it might be?
Yeah, that's very good question and suitable for the situation that my internet connection is very poor. I'm so sorry for that.
No worries.
It's surely not an easy thing to live in a country that doesn't have the right infrastructure for you to support you and to succeed in your career path. But that would put a lot of challenges on your way, like poor internet connection, a lot of sanctions to use the latest technologies and features, and lack of electricity. But impossible is nothing. You can always devote 1 or 2 hours of your time to work for your career path to reach your goals. Personally, I did my research to develop my skills in data science, and I did Coursera courses after I applied for a scholarship for Coursera through the Syrian Youth Assembly, and I had completed the courses in data science and artificial intelligence. So no matter what situation you are in, if you have a goal, you can manage to your time and resources to reach your goal.
Absolutely. And Mikateko, I know you were talking there, but you're muted currently, so we couldn't hear you. So yeah, anything to add to that? You're muted.
Yeah, no, actually, I was just agreeing. Sorry, I think my connection started to lag a little bit.
Oh.
I wasn't really adding input, more so just, yes, 100%. I fully believe that. So not really some input.
Absolutely, right. I feel like where there's a will, there's a way when it comes to technology, right? It's something that we've talked about, and that is that inherently what's so nice about tech is that it's accessible, right? And we can absolutely do many more things, and we have to make it more accessible than it is, but it's more accessible than any other domain is. In quantum mechanics, if I want to learn about, the delayed choice quantum eraser or something, and I want to get into like quantum mechanics and things, I have to get like tens of thousands of dollars of optical equipment. I've got to set it up. I've got to have a very specific lab. It's hard. If I want to do anything else, right, you have to have something physically to do that thing. But what's nice with technology is if I want to learn Python and I just have a phone, if I'm really passionate about it, I still can do it because I can use Google Colab or Cognitive Class and just do it. But that's what's really nice about the world of technology. And so you really are, Maram, an inspiration to, I'm sure, millions out there and everybody joining us in the audience to get into technology regardless of, the infrastructure or the access to certain resources. It's sometimes they won't be there necessarily, those resources, but being able to be like, you know what, I'm passionate about this thing, I want to do it. That is what I think really, really matters. And as a matter of fact, speaking about passion for technology, another question here from Deepak, and this one I think, Mikateko, it would be interesting for you to answer. And one thing that I want to say quickly as well is he's asking, how can we code for like 10 or 12 hours without feeling boring? I feel like really the thing about that is, I mean, say you were to ask an artist, right? How do you manage to write music for hours on end without feeling bored? I mean, their answer would be that that's just what they're passionate about, right? They're not bored. That's just
100%.
what they do, right? That's
Yeah.
what we like doing, right? I like expressing whatever it is that I want to express through music. So similarly, I feel like there's something to do with code there. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, like with certain projects, for example, that I was placed in back in university, certain projects I had to learn, I had to incorporate certain languages. And with these languages, I just wasn't necessarily fond of, but I just did it because I had to score some marks. But once you get into, the real life industry, and once you, start to get into these internships and these jobs that you really want to apply to, you wouldn't just apply to something that you're not passionate about. That's a whole lot of time that you're going to be putting in. 8 hours a day, given that you work a 9 to 5, more hours if you're trying to build your own projects. So you kind of do need to find something that you're passionate about. Not to say that you can sit a full 10, 12 hours doing it. I mean, obviously you're going to need some breaks, but for the average person that might look at that as daunting, as somebody who finds that language or that coding project as passionate, the time flies. You don't even realize that you spent that much time on a project or so. So I don't think that can happen. You just sit there and you're like, wow, this is boring. No, you're probably not passionate about that one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You should be doing what you're passionate about, and I feel like within computer science, when you're passionate about doing anything really, time really just flies. Like I remember this one webcomic of and this is pretty much universal. I've seen it in person myself. There were two guys. They were working on this really complex technical project. Someone walks up to them and says, aren't you on your day off? Why are you still working? They're like, well, we're working on our own project today. We finally have time, away from work to work on our own code today, right? And so that's the thing about computer scientists. They'll go on vacation, but they're still coding, even on vacation. I'm guilty of that myself, because it's just so addictive, right? It's what you love to do. It's really about what you're coding, though, because I will say not everything is extremely happy like that. There's going to be times where you're given something where you're like, I really don't want to do this, but I have to do this, right? Like a lot of the code that you have to write for like data science and AI, for example, I found a lot of it is just infrastructure code, right? Like, for example, I want to train this model, but first I have to make 3 scripts that help me collect my data, clean my data, get it into the format the machine learning framework is going to accept. Then I get to train the model, right? So I feel like a lot of it is infrastructure. That part can be a little bit boring and redundant, but you kind of get used to it, because you see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's it's really about having fun, is what I would say. All right, now there's 2 more questions that I want to get. if there are any more questions, feel free to let us know, but we are running up on our time for today. So again, any more questions, feel free to put it in the stream, but I want to start off with a question from Abe asking, what do you think about cooking your data or modifying your data to achieve some machine learning task using some sort of technique? Specifically, for example, healthcare data isn't often that clean or well populated, right? There's not a lot of the data. Whatever data is there is not very clean. So what do you think about the different techniques to clean or cook or modify the data to get it to be more effective? So what do you think?
You can't use the machine learning without cooking your data first. You have to cook your data and clean it and prepare it for analysis, and then you can use machine learning. But you can't just, first of all, use machine learning and then goes back to cooking. That will not give you the right answers that you are wishing for.
Right. So it's about being able to have that pipeline of pre-processing data before we get to the machine learning stage. And then from there, being able to apply a similar pre-processing pipeline to the new data that we're feeding into the model to run predictions on. Right, so hopefully that answers your question, Abe. We will go ahead and answer any more follow-up questions you may have. And another question, this one's from Asmita. I think we've covered this a little bit, but just really quickly, what do you think about the advances in the intersection of data science and healthcare in the future?
The future is for data science in any field, not just the healthcare. So, but in the healthcare, since it's related to people's safety and it's related to make the world a better place, we are focusing on this, and that's why I put this example when I talked about data science. So I think that data science and healthcare or whatever related to people's safety will make a great combination in the future to make our world a better place.
Absolutely, right. I feel like data science is obviously going to be impactful everywhere, but especially in healthcare, literally saving people's lives, it's going to make a huge impact. So that's definitely something we can look forward to. Also, I see two more comments. Deepak is saying, thank you. That means I'm not passionate about technology. And you know what? That's completely fine, right? That's exactly what we're here to do today, is help you realize, what it is that you're passionate about. It could be technology. It could be literally anything else. It just so happens that I'm very passionate about technology, but whatever it is that you're passionate about, again, could be art, could be math, could be science, whatever it is. I feel like that's something you should work on specializing in, because when the time flies and you just do things for fun in a certain industry, that's when you're actually going to be really good at working in that industry. So thank you for joining today's episode, as well as another comment from Shiva saying this was super insightful. Want to inform you that you wish me good luck for the future, for the further career working on this year. Don't have time to watch all the episodes live, unfortunately, but we'll watch all the episode replays. So no worries, Shiva. Hopefully you can catch up on the replays. Of course, any questions that you have, Shiva, or anybody else that we can't get to in the stream, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll be sure to cover them as much as we can after the streams as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining in today. This was an incredibly fun episode, but there is one more thing before we leave today, and that is that I've had a wonderful time during this episode, right? I mean, I've got to hear from the two of you, your thoughts into the world of technology, and so before we end the show today, there is one more thing. I'd love to hear from the two of you what you'd like to leave our audience with, right? A closing message. And how about we start off with you, Mikateko, and then we can get to Maram. What would you like to leave the audience with today?
No problem. I had a really fun time. This was really great. Thank you so much for having me, Tanmay. And I think the one thing that I would love to leave for the audience is the couple of things that I did mention, the 3 points that I mentioned. Don't be scared to ask. Technology is ever evolving. What you learned, like you mentioned, Tanmay, what you learned today might probably not even be applied tomorrow. So ask as much as possible for the latest news, for the latest technology, the latest language, and how to implement that as much as possible. Don't be afraid to try. And don't be afraid to fail. Often it will happen. more so than not, your failure might just add on to your experience. And that is always, always necessary.
Absolutely, right? I feel like a lot of people think that, when you're working in a certain industry, success is the standard, but it's not at all.
No.
I'm
No.
going to say I've been working on something, and I can't exactly say what it was, but it was something to do with live streaming content at a very high bit rate to be played and recorded on actually multiple client sides, and being able to do it in a way where we can run analytics on the streams as well. And over the course of like 7 days, I had like 8 from scratch rewrites of the system, like from the ground up. So do not expect that when you write something, it's going to work the first time. There in general, whenever you're coding, whenever you're building software, it's always going to be taking multiple tries, multiple different attempts to continue to work and fine tune and figure out what it is that you're building, right? And it's not necessarily that you're failing, it's just that you haven't figured out the exact way of solving it yet, and you're gaining more experience on the way, right? It's a similarly Maram, but what would you like to leave our audience with today?
I would like to say that it's never too late to start. Just be confident and work for your goal, and you will reach and you will reach your goal. Just work for it.
Absolutely. It's never too late. I love that message. There's so many people that'll be like, you know what? Oh, but I'm too old to learn programming now, right? Like I would need to be a mathematical genius. I need to have like an analytical brain. I need to do these things. But it really is never too late. And so making sure that you always have that sort of drive to do what it is that you're passionate about, I think really makes sense. Also, just really quickly, another comment from Asmita asking, Tanmay, will you continue the AI deep learning series or something similar to that anytime soon? I am working on it. Not necessarily really, really similar series to help you learn about deep learning and artificial intelligence technology. I will be continuing it very soon, so stay tuned, and hopefully it will be a wonderful resource for you to get into the world of AI, even if you've never used any of this technology before. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. This was a really fun episode. I got to learn a lot about the world of data science, software engineering, where you think it's going in the future. So much really fun stuff. And of course, huge thank you to you, Maram, and you, Mikateko, for actually joining me today. This has been a very fun episode, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again in the future. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.